Hey there, I'm Pronger Faulkner, and I wanted to read my chapter today out of one of the books that I published. The first book that I published was called The Autoimmune Warrior's Healing Key, and this is about my journey back from 4 autoimmune diseases and how I was able to turn my health around and get my life back. From there, I was in a collaboration called The Truth About Success. And then I also went on to create my own collaboration called Absolute Will. Now, all 3 of these books have become bestsellers. Absolute Will hit 40 #1 spots on Amazon, and including getting 3 of the coveted orange bestseller badges. And this book actually just won, is a award-winning finalist in the 2022 International Book Awards. So I wanted to read my chapter from this book. It is such an inspiration. This book is just my pride and joy. I am so honored to have been able to publish this with 20 other women from 7 countries around the world. I'll just read the blurb on the back here. How can we find our resolve to persevere despite a difficult health challenge or several? Where does our willpower come from, and how does it show up in our lives? Absolute Will is a powerful, heartfelt, inspirational collaboration by 21 women from Canada, the United Kingdom, the United Arab Emirates, the United States of America, Australia, South Africa, and Bulgaria. The authors have linked arms to share their personal, vulnerable, insightful, true stories of willpower when facing emotional and mental health crises, physical injuries, and disease. So I am going to read my chapter called If Only. I lay sobbing on the frozen ground of the riding arena. My leg felt as if it had been struck by lightning, and it had made a crunching sound as it broke in 4 places. The big gray warm blood was a handful for me, yet my coach had talked me into leasing and boarding him at her lesson barn. She came highly recommended, so I trusted her to calm my fears about being in over my head with too much horse. Seeing some crispy leaves blowing in the wind, Prince had spooked sideways, and I had fallen off. It was January 2007. Vancouver Island winters are usually rainy, but a cold front had moved in. I convinced myself riding wouldn't be that bad because the open-air arena was covered. I hadn't realized until starting our group lesson that the roof leaked, and the hog fuel footing had become soaked. With the temperature dip, it froze solid and provided no padding. As tears rolled down my cheeks, a wave of floaty feelings came over me. My coach handed me the horse's reins and said, "Get up, stop being such a baby." As an independent, strong-willed 33-year-old, I found her assessment of me embarrassing. I needed her help to stand, then limped over to the mounting block. I don't know what suddenly made Prince so cooperative, but perhaps he sensed my fear had been replaced by obedient determination. I wasn't aware enough to be afraid anymore. My body was in survival mode, and my mind hadn't registered that I was injured. Lifting my left leg into the stirrup, I stood on the broken one before hoisting myself up onto the horse. I teetered awkwardly in the saddle as I swung my right leg over and became confused because I couldn't maneuver properly. I announced matter-of-factly, "I can't get my foot in the stirrup." So with the lesson group watching, the coach moved around my horse, grabbed the heel of my boot, and shoved my foot into the stirrup. Feeling like I was about to throw up, I finally abandoned my lesson. I took my horse to the barn, untacked him, put him in his paddock, and hobbled to my car before the coach came to check on me. As I unzipped my boot, we both gasped at seeing my swollen purple ankle, yet she didn't suggest calling anyone. I still felt like I was floating, and I had no idea what I was doing or saying. I don't remember driving home. In the emergency room that evening, the on-call orthopedic surgeon showed up wearing a black leather motorcycle outfit, holding his helmet and reeking of alcohol. I was in utter disbelief, and as I looked at the other hospital staff to see if they were ready to intervene, I anxiously remembered watching movies involving medical malpractice. The surgeon reviewed my x-rays and said this wasn't something he would do right then. Knowing he'd been drinking, I was relieved. I had ankle surgery the following day to reattach the bottom knob of my tibia, but despite my complaints about severe knee pain, the surgeon missed 3 additional upper tibia breaks on my x-rays. He only spotted them after a CT scan 2 weeks later when I returned to have my incision staples removed and kept telling him there was something else wrong. By then, he couldn't do anything about the breaks without creating additional damage, and a distracting secondary problem had emerged: a burning sensation in my blotchy purple and white foot, over my ankle, and up my lower leg. As a nurse scrubbed off remnants of disinfectant and plaster, the cloth felt like prickles on my skin. The surgeon ignored this complaint too. In the weeks following, the pain became so intense I couldn't tolerate the weight of a bed sheet on my toes at night, and I didn't want anything or anyone touching my leg. My new cast was removable, so I took it off sometimes, thinking the squeezing pressure caused the burning, intense pain. The surgeon had instructed me to flex my ankle as soon as possible, but it seemed locked in place. I ate painkillers like candy, 8 or 10 a day, but they didn't help. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to cut off my foot because the pain was unbearable. I began planning what life would look like without my lower leg. Would I be on crutches forever? How much does a prosthetic foot cost? Would it attach at the knee, maybe? How comfortable would it be to wear over a stump? I guess my horseback riding days are over. How will I drive the 90 minutes to work? Maybe I won't be able to keep the career I worked so hard for. I was terrified, but because of the unrelenting pain, I seriously considered amputation. Nearly 2 months after my accident, I saw the surgeon again. As I explained my pain, he unbuckled my cast, and without warning, he wrenched on my foot with both hands, saying I ought to be moving it by now. My blood-curdling scream echoed down the hospital hallway, and I grabbed my crutch to bash him with it, but I didn't follow through. My foot was purple and white and locked in place because my ankle was so swollen and stiff, and anything touching my skin felt like razor blades. I could barely breathe, but somehow managed to scream at him to never touch me again. I think he finally believed me. 30 minutes later, a different surgeon came in. He promised he wouldn't touch my leg, but he wanted to see it. And then he said this looked like complex regional pain syndrome, also called reflex sympathetic dystrophy. I can't remember if he said it was an autoimmune response or explained the nervous systems. If he did, the words fell on deaf ears. He prescribed gabapentin and recommended specific physical therapies to start immediately. My subsequent year-long rehabilitation was tough, but having answers and a plan made me determined not to be an amputee. I knew doing the hard work would be worth it. Fast forward to late 2015. The sharp pain in my hips had exhausted me for months. My body felt heavy. Every minor task I used to do without thinking about it felt like a monumental challenge, and I was missing weeks, sometimes months of work at a time. While I had worked hard to return to normal after my accident, I continued dissociating from a lifetime of compounding emotional situations I kept trying to ignore. Childhood traumas, an abusive stepfather, past relationships as far back as high school with emotional abuse, gaslighting, physical violence, death threats, and police interventions. The stressful, volatile divorce I was going through after leaving a relationship almost 2 years earlier. The years spent earning my commerce degree while working full-time and raising 2 stepkids, only to face losing my career because of failing health. My riding accident, which triggered one autoimmune crisis after another, hypothyroidism in 2011, systemic lupus in 2012, and mixed connective tissue disease in 2014. Doctors saying autoimmune diseases are complex, there is no cure, and I would need prescriptions to survive. And the managers at work who didn't believe I was sick. I felt as if I'd been pushing a boulder up a mountain and was too tired to take another step. I had battled so much, yet felt defeated. No matter how hard I fought, the world fought back harder. My symptoms were confusing, even to the doctors who I thought could help get me better. I had stopped trying to figure out if my heavy, exhausting fatigue was a symptom of the autoimmune diseases or from the pain that I was in. I took medications every few hours for years, but pills don't fix the underlying problems. They mask the symptoms. I didn't know my autoimmune malfunctions stemmed from a malfunctioning endocrine system, which is the messenger system for glands and hormones. I didn't know underneath inflammation is oxidative stress, an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants in the body. And chronic stress and trauma are contributing factors to disease. Doctors kept telling me the inflammation was because of these incurable diseases. It was a hopeless realization that I'd always have these diseases, which meant I would always have the inflammation, and therefore pain. I didn't want to hurt for another day, let alone forever. The brightest light in my life was my new partner, Mike. I had finally found someone who was loving, supportive, and he was so confident we could conquer the world together. But I couldn't get my hopes up. Sure, I had some better days, but I struggled more often than not. Ruminating on how bad things had become, I realized my desire to keep trudging forward had left me months earlier. I had only been pretending life was good, posting smiley selfies online to prove I made the best of things despite fighting 4 autoimmune diseases, a toxic work environment, and an ex trying to punish me. It wasn't fair to expect Mike to look after me. We had known each other forever, but had been together less than 2 years. Compounded stress, plus ignoring my body's many warning signs of trouble ahead, had catapulted me into a state of frustration, fear, and downward spiraling health. I was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. Sometimes even the strongest people fall and aren't sure it's worth getting back up. It's so much effort to pick yourself up over and over again. I desperately wanted to stop feeling as if I were fighting against everything and instead feel like I was fighting for something. The consequences of waiting for other people to fix me weighed on me like the imaginary boulder I was up against, because waiting had turned out to be a colossal waste of time. Years of my life I would never get back. The day I asked myself why I was still waiting was the day I began to live like I was dying. I mean, none of us is getting out of here alive anyway, but if I couldn't figure out how to feel better, at least I would die trying and be out of my misery either way. Mike and I had been struggling financially, but through a series of seemingly random events, I laugh because I tell that other story quite often. We were blessed to go on a vacation to Nicaragua in early 2016. While we were there, I only had one day where my feet were so swollen that I couldn't walk, but the other days were filled with enjoying the fresh Caribbean breezes, eating platefuls of fresh fruit, vegetables, rice, and beans, chatting with expat business owners, and swimming in the salty sea. I could feel my stress and pain drifting away, replaced by contentment washing over me like the waves lapping the sandy shores. It showed me what life could be like if only things were different. If only things were different is such a powerful statement, isn't it? A planted flag claiming we can't possibly do anything about our circumstances. But what if things really could be different? There's no instruction manual on how to be strong, but I think people have extraordinary levels of untapped willpower, maybe more than some will ever realize. Our reflections on what we've survived, our core values, and our beliefs about ourselves are keys to unlocking our resolve, our absolute will to persevere despite monumental challenges. When Mike and I made the decision to move to Bighorn Island to start building a home on a piece of jungle land, everything fell into place. It became a reality by the end of that year. The longer we were there, the better I felt. My chronic pain subsided. I no longer needed afternoon naps. I slept soundly every night, and I felt rejuvenated. Even when we encountered challenging problems with contractors, nothing felt impossible or hopeless anymore. While we weren't able to continue living in Nicaragua, our time there was the kickstart to giving me my life back. I didn't understand exactly how I'd been able to get better, so when we returned to Canada the following year, my mission became to learn all I could about autoimmune illness, the lifestyle components that contribute to it, and how making different decisions can change everything. I've been able to intentionally continue my low-stress, plant-based, anti-inflammatory, health-focused lifestyle ever since, and I no longer have debilitating autoimmune symptoms. The prescriptions doctors said I would need for life haven't been filled in almost 5 years, and my life looks pretty good for real, not just on social media. Reestablishing ourselves back in Canada while continuing to finish building in Nicaragua hasn't come without significant financial and personal struggle. Reflecting on how far I've come in my life, where I'm headed, and reminding myself of the big picture have been critical in motivating me to keep going and in making pivotal decisions around things that matter most. I used to believe it wasn't possible to get better, yet when I accidentally stumbled upon a new way of living, I realized how limited my beliefs have been in myself, in my body's ability to heal, and in what's possible. Now, whenever I find myself thinking, if only things were different, I figure out a way.